Unlocking Your World of Creativity with best-selling author and brand innovator, Mark Stinson. This episode is brought to you by White Cloud Coffee Roasters, where every bean tells a story of adventure. Visit whitecloudcoffee.com and use the code CREATIVITY.
Welcome back, friends, to our podcast, Your World of Creativity, where we travel around the globe talking to creative practitioners of all kinds, entrepreneurs, artists, innovators, about what gets them inspired, how they organize their ideas, and of course, how they turn their imagination into impact. And today's guest didn't just build a successful business, he helped create an entirely new category within the entertainment industry. My guest was co-founder of Rhino Records, most recently Shout Factory, and now working in the nonprofit space. Please welcome in Richard Foos. Richard,
Wow.
Welcome in.
Thank you. Great introduction.
Transforming the way music and TV and film archives are really valued and distributed and monetized. It's all about this word monetize. I don't think in the 70s and 80s when you were doing your work, monetize wasn't a word, but that's what you were doing with out-of-print records and bringing back some of these artists. I really want to explore that, some of what you're doing now, this whole reissue culture, repurposing of content. But one of the things we talk about on our podcast is on creative vision. How do you see possibilities that others might overlook? And in the 70s, that's what you saw a trend. You saw the next thing. I was wondering maybe where you saw that, how you felt that. What was your intuition that said, this could be a whole new way of reissuing?
I had no idea that it would be as big as it got. No idea. But my partner and I, we had grown up on the music of the 50s and the 60s. And now we had a little record store. And we were very frustrated by one, most of the music that we grew up in and loved was out of print. And two, even way back then, occasionally when there would be a reissue, it would always be poorly done. It was unsatisfactory. So the thought that we could give music fans a good experience because we knew the music so well, we knew what a good reissue album would look like. And,
Yes.
And we did it, and we didn't really know that we were creating a new industry, but we did.
Yes. Was there any particular, I'm curious, a specific artist or album or moment when you were convinced that this could be a viable business?
The first album that we ever reissued was Alan Sherman. All his music was out of print. We had grown up on his music. The funny thing was, for a brief period of time in the early 60s, both adults and children loved his music. They shared it together, and he had these gigantic multi-million copy albums, but then he became out of vogue and boom, he's forgotten. But we loved him, we loved his music, and reissued and sold enough to make a bit of,
Yes.
and that fueled us to do the next one and the next one. And eventually we were able to work with all the majors, who almost all their older artists were out of print. Even the one that just sold hundreds of thousands of units and really convinced us was James Brown. Now, if you can believe it, 1979, all James Brown music is out of print. The only album you can buy of James Brown is his latest one, and he's not having hits anymore. So nobody wanted that. And we went to a hologram that became Universal, and they said, sure, we'll listen to James Brown's greatest hits. And then right around 2 or 3 years later, when CDs become the viable configuration, they give us the rights for the CD. And that's where baby boomers really wanted to had to rebuy their collection and wanted the music that they grew up on and loved. And then that pushed us into the stratosphere of success.
Sure. And having owned the record store at that time too, I was wondering how much of the creative insight came from being the music fan You were a listener too. Or
Yeah.
was it, hey, entrepreneur, we see a market, we see an opportunity. Which do you think was driving you the most?
98% music. Yeah.
Yeah.
We were very lucky. My partner and I were record music nerds, but we could occasionally get a date, meaning that we were fans more than we wouldn't go crate digging for the rare B-side.
Yes.
We liked the hits and the artist's best output. We weren't looking for obscurities. And that's what most music fans are more like us than the record nerds, let's say.
Right. Often, as a branding marketing guy, I like to think about the soul of the brand. And when I think Rhino Records, I wonder, were you more of a music company, a publishing company, a record company? How did you think about what kind of brand you were trying to build?
A record company that was doing something different in terms of our reissues. We grew up on Mad Magazine, and we were skewering the industry whenever we could with our campaigns or doing parodies of hit songs and things like that. So that was part of our thinking as well.
And I guess the larger mission, can we preserve music culturally? Can we preserve artists? How much of that was driving what you were trying to do? Just the James Brown example was perfect.
A lot. We wanted this music to be accessible. We hated that it was locked up in vaults somewhere and people couldn't hear it. Remember, there wasn't things like downloading oldies radio. If there were used record stores, there weren't a lot of them. So there really was, once a record went out of print, which was very quick after it wasn't a hit anymore,
Yes.
it was locked away, and unless it was a gigantic hit, you wouldn't hear it. There's no way to hear it. Your best bet was if you had an older brother that would give you his old records.
I was just thinking the other day, streaming libraries and catalogs and rediscovered. It's like, I would really like to, again, just sit down for a couple of hours and listen to Steely Dan's Asia album from beginning to end. That kind of
Yes.
thing, it went away for a while. You can't get it back now, but there is something about the vinyl coming back that gives you that experience, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Vinyl has a warmer sound. It looks good. And there's something about sitting in your living room, smoking a pipe with some bourbon
It does sound different.
on digital or CD. The sound is much more brittle, and you lose some of the warmth.
Yeah. Give us some behind the scenes of this whole process. Licensing, restoring. Were there re-recordings too, or were you getting the original recordings? You know, there's packaging, there's distribution. Yeah, give us a little bit of the nuts and bolts of how you were building it.
First of all, again, we were thinking about all of the exploitation, poorly designed, poorly compiled reissues that we had grown up on. And there were many of them, but they usually were done for exploitive purposes. So the sound wasn't that good. They would master from other records or bad tapes. So we insisted that we would only master from the original master tapes. So we would go into the vaults of the record companies and find them. We'd find, if we weren't an expert in the artist, we would find an expert on the artist, but we would always be editors. The expert might say with James Brown, everybody's got It's a Man's World. We say, no, you have to have it on it. Or Aretha Franklin, everyone has respect. Okay, but it's respect is going to be on the
Yes.
her greatest hit CD, not obscurities that never were released. So yeah, and then we find a great writer to do the liner notes and a great artist to do we'd research and find a great photo We used the best archive who became one of my best friends, Michael Oakes Archives. Michael Oakes was Phil Oakes, the singer who my partner and I idolize, brother. And so in every way, we would package it for the fan and give them a great experience.
Yes. In hindsight, everybody knows Rhino Records and the model now. But at the beginning, what kind of resistance, if any, did you get from the labels or the rights holders? In the early days, not everybody probably embraced this idea.
The hardest thing was distribution, not distributors. There were tons of indie distributors, but record stores. So if you think, I bet in Boise at the time, maybe, for example, maybe there was one eclectic used hippie record store. Maybe.
Yes.
And the other record stores would be mall chains that would never carry any of our records. So that was the real challenge. In the 90s, right before the business crash, there was this proliferation of literally thousands of superstores that were like, Best Buy went into the record business.
Yes.
I remember the head buyer bragging, we have 25,000 titles, and I go all over the world to get imports so we can have more. So and that was such a boom to our business. All of a sudden, every thousands of stores had to buy our entire catalog that now numbered many hundreds of titles. But it was an incredible challenge at the beginning to get our records in stores. And it was so inefficient, so let's just say they carry one Turtles' Greatest Hits at a mall store, maybe. They sell it. They got to go to their central warehouse in Minneapolis and hope that the warehouse has it where they order from. If they don't, they got to order from our distributor. It could be a month before they get it.
Yes. And then you hit the restart button with Shout Factory. What was new and different that you were trying to build with that company?
With Shout Factory, as we started, the record business crashed in the early 2000s. And because of downloading and a number of other factors. And we moved over to do the same thing with film and TV. And it's the same situation. That DVD was really the only configuration. There wasn't downloading. So we did the same thing with DVD. And many of the greatest cult shows were not in print, mainly because of music issues. So, which we knew so well. So, example of a couple shows, one of the biggest favorite fan cult shows of all time, Freaks and Geeks, had never been issued on DVD because there were 100 gigantic hit songs that no one in their right mind would try to clear from the biggest bands. And so that was our first DVD we put out at Shout Factory, the complete series of Freaks and Geeks, and we did the same thing with DVD. You could put on lots of extras. We'd have commentaries. We'd interview the cast. We'd get the outtakes, and again, give the fans a great experience.
Yes. We've been talking about the creative process, but something fascinating that I've seen a thread through the work you've been describing is how you understood how people connect with music, TV, film from a previous generation, maybe their childhood. What do you think that tells us about human nature, or nostalgia, or storytelling? How does this memory thing that we carry around?
I'll get to that in a second, but you have to remember, whether it be studios or record companies, it was always older people that were running them. They weren't the fans themselves.
Good point.
And they weren't necessarily somebody like, he just passed away, and what a genius, Clive Davis.
Yes.
The business affairs attorney in Columbia. He wasn't growing up like a giant music fan. He was a genius and got it. But that's what the industry was made of. we were the first ones who grew up on this and were the actual fans. So we were one of them. So we could do it in a whole different way from a fan's perspective rather than from a older businessman's. And nobody thought everything in the music business, and I'm sure in films, was, if you can remember before VHS and Beta, once a film plays in theaters, then it's a hit, and then it's now a catalog title. And if it's not The Godfather or something like that, it's lost forever. Oh, and occasionally show up on your TV station. But you're really I grew up in cities that had 3 TV stations.
Yes.
And they would have the late movie, but they're not going to play like a Little Shop of Horrors. Like your favorite cult movie is, that's not. So there was no way to see it until there was DVD.
Sure. Good stuff.
So, by the way, whether it be studio heads or record company heads, their mission was hit. What's the next hit? And they didn't know that the stuff we would grow up on has this unbelievable attachment. And you can talk to now kids. I remember my nephew, who's 40, was really frustrated and said, "I hate the new music. It's not like It's not like the great music that was in the early 2000s. So it doesn't matter where the music. There's just something inherent about the music you grow up on that you love, and that's what the film companies and the music companies didn't understand. Now they do.
Yes, yes. And maybe that brings me to the question about catalogs. Currently, almost every day we hear that some major artist is going to sell their catalog. And there's implications of that about maybe reissues or compilations, but certainly about licensing and commercial use of all kinds. Why do you think that this newfound appreciation, or at least their focus on catalogs as on
digital, it's a different story, and it's all just up there. Everything's in print, and if you put it up on Spotify, there's a catalog. There's not much you can do to it, so it just sits there and earns money. And the private equity companies see that, and they just love stuff that just earns money. You don't need any people to do it. You just need somebody to count them.
Yes, let it roll.
Cash your checks and all that. So it's becoming very. And I don't know, would you rather, if you're a private equity company, would you rather own the Steely Dan songs or oil and gas?
Yeah.
It's certainly more seductive, yeah.
Yeah, got it. And thinking about the listeners of this podcast who are creators themselves, what sort of lessons learned do you feel like that we could share that says, you're making work now, you certainly want to make artistic or creative impact, but you want to make a living at this too. What are some of the insights from your business experience could we pass on?
Here's my biggest insight. If you believe in what you're doing, and if you believe in what you're doing and you enjoy it, and let's just say, and somehow you can either A, eke out a living, or B, do it and you have to spend a lot of time on it, but somehow can make a living some other way. The secret to being successful is just stay in business. So even if it's successful as we were at Rhino, and I talked about the James Brown, the nature of the business was such that it literally took 15, 20 years to be successful because, everything, especially in the music business, because nobody trusts anybody, everything was built around advances. We're so great. We got all this capital selling James Brown, but then we throw it into getting the rights to the Four Seasons catalog, even more money.
Yes.
It was, so to really make it and was 15, 20 years. So that's what if you enjoy it, don't get frustrated. So eventually, of course, you come up with Google or YouTube, and it's such a good idea. You can't, but that's really rare. So my secret to business is stay in business.
There you go. I love that. Now you're taking your creative energy and insights and expertise into the nonprofit world. What sort of focus are you working on now, and how do you think your experience applies?
The other thing with music, which we haven't talked about, was my partner and I were children of the 60s, and we came enthralled and romanticized that we could change the world. Our generation could change the world for better. We saw war, poverty, oppression, and saying, why can't we all just live together in harmony? And so right from the beginning, I was on one hand having fun, but on the other hand, I felt part of the movement. I was going to every protest I could go to. I was doing community work, et cetera, et cetera. So that was all wrapped up into music. Was like the soundtrack of our generation. So we always thought about, we have a responsibility to our customers, to our employees, to the world, and always wove that into our business. So now that I'm comfortable financially, I spend my time on trying to make social impact and improve our world. I'm a little grain of sand. I'm not saying I'm single-handedly going to change it, but I'm trying.
Yes. And the idea of cultural movements, we find, like you just said, we're even going back, these are things that motivate us today.
Yes, exactly.
Very cool. Listeners, you've been listening to Richard Foos. He was co-founder of Rhino Records and Shout Factory. We've been talking about that creative work along with nonprofit work today and the impact that he can make. And I'm going to put all the links to his organizations and projects in the show notes so you can find and learn more about that. Richard, what a great conversation. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you. And me too.
And who of us can't remember those Rhino Records commercials? I'm still seeing the Christmas's greatest hits. Whatever it is, it's all coming back to me.
Thank you.
And I can't wait to go to the used record store and get re-energized about some of this all.
Yeah, I still go a few times a year to used records, even though we now live in a small house where I don't even have room for record. I think I have 2 albums.
Yes.
Which is in storage.
Of course, I made the mistake of trading my vinyl for CDs, and now I wish I had it all back. I had an entire basement full of records, and now I wish I'd had them back. Richard, thanks a lot. And listeners, thank you for coming by to your world of creativity. We've been talking today about how innovation comes from seeing the value that maybe others overlook, how your archives and past work might be engines for future growth, how the audience and the customer can teach us a lot about memory and meaning, and of course, how creativity continues to shape our culture, even in work for causes and nonprofits. So as I said, we'll put all of Richard's links in the show notes. And if you've enjoyed today's conversation, come back again next time. We'll continue these conversations about inspiration and ideas and confidence to get your work out into the world. And until next time, I'm Mark Stinson, and we'll keep unlocking your world of creativity. Bye for now.